How y'all doing today? All right. And this is not just Social Workers Alabama, but y'all are special to me, so I have to do the shout out. But we're shooting live in multiple platforms. But we are we've it's been a tough day. It's been an excellent day today because we had an awesome training and had a number of people to show up for our clinical training for the DSM. And so we just thank all of you all that attended. But we are moving into this week in supervision, and we're going to discuss a little bit about what what happened in this case with I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Gypsy Rose case. Gypsy Rose, I think she had like another name, but Gypsy Rose, okay. And so this is part of what we discussed in supervision. Prior to that, we discussed some things relative to being able to diagnose anxiety. Um, we had intended on getting into some ethics, but we'll do that maybe next week. But I want to talk to you a little bit about that because I like to try to make things a bit compelling by bringing real life situations and scenarios and putting them on our therapist lap to for them to be able to assess and determine what they think is going on and how they might treat the individual. And so we use the case of Gypsy Rose. So I want to talk a little bit about that for some of you all who are not familiar with that. We're going to try to show you a clip that may break that down. If I could find, let me see what we got here. We're going to try to show the clip. But just before we do that, um, we do want to let you know about a training that we have, EMDR Insights, on February 27th. We'd love to see you there if you want to learn EMDR, some things about that. My sister Juliet Wise, who is a clinician, I'm so proud that she is going to be able, she'll be presenting for us on that. Of course, if you're a part of Social Workers of Alabama, we've got a nice little hookup for you on this training. Also, we do have our supervisor training. That's like next month. It just seemed like we just did it. And so we're excited about you all that have been signing up for that. And we're going to present that on March 25th and 26th. So we want you to be there for that. And also, we are in the beta phase of a course, the DSM-5 TR training. We now have a self-pace, and we're easing that out because we still want to do some testing. But keep a heads up for that. And so those of you all who aren't able to attend the now required training for LICSWs, our training is not required, but the DSM training is required, and we have that for you. All right. And so we want to transition from that and get into the Gypsy Rose. Let's take a listen at some tidbits about this case for those of you all who don't already know about that. So we're going to play this and hopefully y'all can hear it.
Good morning, George. Her dramatic life of tragedy and survival has just captivated so many, especially Gen Zers, in a way that very few have. Gypsy Rose Blanchard, who helped kill her mother to escape a life of suffering and abuse, has been the subject of countless media stories and a Hollywood tape.
To be a cautionary so that the next person that might be in a position of don't take the
Gypsy Rose Blanchard is finally tasting the freedom she's long dreamed of. Tell me about the day you stepped out from behind the prison walls.
You don't realize how much you're restricted in prison. I felt like I was in a black and white world and I could step in color. It was amazing.
Her world shifted after spending nearly 9 years in prison for helping plot the murder of her own mother. Gypsy, a victim of her mother's psychological syndrome by proxy, in which parents seek sympathy through the exaggerated and made-up illnesses of their children. Since childhood, Gypsy's mother, Dee Dee, portrayed her daughter as frail, disabled, suffering from multiple illnesses, including leukemia and muscular dystrophy, subjecting the girl to life in a wheelchair, a feeding tube, and unnecessary surgeries, even having some of her teeth removed. It was all a lie. When you look at these pictures now of Gypsy Rose, what do you think?
I don't even associate with that world anymore.
Yeah, look at that body language, man. I'm sorry. Check that out. Mm. That's something we're going to talk about a little bit because the emotion that she expresses, about that to me, and I could be wrong. I would want to evaluate as the therapist. It's almost like contemptuous. Like she says she doesn't identify, and that's understandably so. If you looked at the commentary on this, you will see that the way that she presents now is a whole 180 from the young girl with the high pitched voice that was anyway. Let me just play the rest of it.
I don't believe in it. She had a lot of demons herself that she was struggling with. I just wanted out of that situation. I thought that was the only.
In 2015, Gypsy says she reached a breaking point, plotted with a boyfriend she met online, Nicholas Godejohn, to kill her mother. Gypsy would later plead guilty to second-degree murder. Godejohn was convicted of carrying out the stabbing death and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Is it fair that he is incarcerated for life for killing your mom and you're out?
Well, I'm sure that we both have a lot of regrets. All I can really say is that I did my time. He's doing his time for his part. And I wish him well on his journey.
During her prison stay, public fascination with Gypsy exploded. Her story portrayed in multiple documentaries and a drama series, The Act. Gypsy now sharing unscripted personal details about her past in a Lifetime docuseries, The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. You say that you're addicted to pain pills. How serious is this?
You know, this is really hard to talk about because it took me down a really dark. Um, but I felt like it was my only way to cope for a time.
So when you made this decision to take part in the killing of your mom, were you high?
Yes, I was.
And do you blame that for your decision?
No, no. I don't blame drugs. I don't blame anything. I don't make excuses.
And now?
And now I'm sober. No, I haven't used in 4 years.
Okay. Anyway, she's moved on with her life. Um, and she is in a relationship and yada yada yada. So um we put the center focus on a few things in the group, okay? We brought, I presented a multiple choice question that provided information, well, a multiple choice question about that included Munchausen syndrome, which was the answer. And so we wanted to make sure that even prior to showing the video, that our supervisees were familiar with what that is. So we talked about that, and we talked about the classification of this disorder being changed. I think that was in a recent DSM, but I'm not sure. But it's no longer it's considered it's a fictitious disorder imposed on another, and I believe it's formally referred to as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Okay. And so if those of you are not familiar with it, this is when you have someone who's willfully committing abuse intentionally or deceitfully, feigning the physical, and basically they're abusing a child, feigning uh the physical, psychiatric, and developmental disorders of another. In other words, they're going to the doctor and saying there's problems with the child when there's not problems. And that's what happened with Gypsy Rose. And so, when we think about this, what is the impact psychologically? And you've got to be looking at this because you could treat either one of them could be your client. You could be treating well, not in this case because the mother was killed, but let's just say that she was alive. um well, it'd be difficult in this scenario, but let's just say before the murder you were treating the mother. Okay, what would we be looking at as a cause for these behaviors? What would make someone want to inflict pain on their child for a reward, perhaps? Or like, what is it that they're getting out of this? So these are the questions in the dialogue that you want to have. Of course, you'll know the answers, but you present that to the group. And then on the flip side, you also can discuss and case Gypsy Rose. which we probably talked a little bit more about her than even the mother, um, because we just found it to be compelling, the story and her reaction to the whole deal. Here it is. If you all should check it out. There's a documentary. It's either on Netflix or Prime, Amazon Prime. And then they've got a Lifetime something, and then they've got a movie. But it's very compelling. But if you looked at Gypsy Rose, dang, we already 10 minutes. If you looked at her prior to her going to jail and things like that, she was like a totally different person. And this was compelling in itself. When I say different person, she was like a teenager or older and very childlike. So she'll talk like she's a little kid, right? And she seemed like she was sick, because in all actuality, the mother made her believe that she was sick. She said here that not until she was incarcerated did she realize there were still other things, that she was not sick. So we have to process all of this. Like, okay, so what happens to a child who has been, and this is what some of the things that we discuss. Like, if you have been in a situation to take on a sick role, can that also make you sick somewhat mentally or even physically? The reason we asked the question, or the reason I asked the question, is because she really seems sick. She really not only seems sick in physically, but in the mind to a degree, because she seemed very delayed, as if she was slow. The Gypsy Rose that you see after the incarceration, all this, is a totally different disposition, and she almost to me seems genius. She seems very clever. She seems like convincing and compelling, and but then it makes us want to study this character more. If Gypsy Rose was your character, would she have a diagnosis? It's just really interesting, because the last week we studied about two individuals that end up having childhood disabilities that they claim uh contributed to them becoming sociopaths in some type of way. And if you look at the video, we explain that a little bit. But it was just by coincidence that we bring in Gypsy Rose, but it seems like a almost like situation, to where you have someone in this case who is thought to have a childhood disorder, but the parenting impacting the mental in a way that, is she a sociopath? Is she a narcissist? Is she a psychopath? Would she be considered to have antisocial personality disorder, depression? Like, does she qualify for diagnosis? It's just a compelling story, and we processed a bit about her, because when you're studying behaviors, there's things that you need to be able to ask questions about. Some of us are going to be in forensics, and you need to be able to see in between the lines of this woman, like, identity wise, who is Gypsy Rose? Like what happens when someone has been nurtured and groomed to be someone that they're not, in order to avoid abuse? Because her mother was very, very abusive, by the way. Somebody said she's in chains. She was forced to take heavy drugs to sedate her for things that she was not diagnosed with. Her teeth had to be pulled out. She went through multiple surgeries. She was not allowed to have her own freedom. But she had to take on this sick role to appease the mother, who was very abusive. So she had to take on a role and somewhat split off from who she was into something else. She didn't seem to have much compassion or empathy for the loss of her mother, to me. Or for that matter, the boyfriend, who she says she just wishes him the best. Like, should we empathy that though? How much capacity does someone who was unable to attach to a parental figure because of horrific abuse, what should be the expectation of this human being in relationships? We should not expect that they will become a murderer, but what are they truly capable of? Like, again, we have these two past examples that we showed from last week. Look at what happened to them. So much has to do with the parenting. So, in relationship, what we find out with individuals that have experienced something like this, many times you have someone who is plays more of the narcissistic role, or the role of the controller, the role of the one who lacks compassion and empathy, like her mother did. And you see the abuse come to Gypsy. But so often do you also see that these same individuals also end up many times demonstrating the same type of behaviors as did their parent. Is this what happened somewhat with the relationship with Gypsy Rose and the boyfriend? These are things that, like in forensics, you would have to process. They'll pay you a lot of money to do that, but you would have to process to try to come to some conclusions and understanding about what happened in this situation. And it takes a lot of deep psych thinking to get to that point. So could she perhaps have manipulated this situation, given that, like, can she really even attach in a romantic relationship? Is she capable of that? Where would she even fall on the spectrum of attachment? Period. Like, would she be one that's disorganized? Would she be one that's fearful, disorganized, or fearful, dismissive, anxious, right? And so these are some of the things that we discuss on this case. Should she even be thought, if she doesn't have empathy for the loss of her mother or the loss of this person, should that be empathy? One thing that we talked about too is that many times, what was I going to say? It was a statement I made. Just because you know that something is right inside, or maybe just cerebrally, you know something is right, doesn't mean that you feel it inside. Okay. Just because you know that it's right doesn't mean that you feel it. So, is it possible that, wouldn't it be easy? Is it unnatural for someone like Gypsy Rose to not have empathy for the death of her mother? Is that unnatural, considering what she experienced? And maybe that's why she got the lighter sentence than the dude that actually killed her mom, who she didn't seem to have a lot of sympathy for or empathy for. So, we talked a lot more about things concerning diagnosis, Munchausen syndrome, and things of that nature. But this is how we can bring certain situations into the forefront of the therapist, and giving them the challenge of trying to identify diagnosis, identify how you would treat, because many of us are going to be exposed to these types of cases. And where would you start? Are you going to be judgmental? Will you have empathy? Will you be able to identify the emotions and the feelings of the clients that you're exposed to? Many times we need background. Like, we need to know what causes Munchausen syndrome. We need to even study, has anybody thought about what is the impact on the children of individuals who have that diagnosis? Right? There has to be a trend of impact, which I know some about. But are we aware of that? Because if we had to interview, if we had to diagnose, if we had to provide intervention for somebody, we need to be in the mind, we need to have the level of thinking that takes us to be able to understand what someone like that might have experienced. And so if you can do that as a clinician, if you can teach clinicians how to do this, you're going to have a lot of success. We're all going to have a lot of success. And that is all we have for today. Just some food for thought. All right. We hope to see y'all again on next week. And we will see you soon. Y'all have a blessed weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.